Welcome to the Master Dealmaker's Secrets podcast. And now, here's sales growth strategist, John Blake.
Welcome to Master Dealmaker's Secrets. I'm John Blake. This is episode 96, and today we're going to be talking about qualitative versus quantitative measures. So really excited to be sharing this with you. But before we do that, if you've got people in your pipeline, you want to convert more of those people into paying clients, I encourage you to head over to johnblakeaudio.com, where you can get your free audio training where I actually show you the exact strategy that you can use to double sales with your existing leads. So this is exactly what I do with my brand new clients. It works really consistently. Once you put it into place, you can easily teach it to other people in your team, and then it becomes systemized. It's easy to track, and you can get it all right now over at johnblakeaudio.com. Not only will you get the audio training, what you'll also get is a PDF guide that actually has the word-for-word scripts that you can use when you are calling people that haven't bought yet, that you've spoken to, that you've done some sort of a presentation with, and also what to write in your emails and exactly when to write emails and when to call over a 90-day period. So this is a particularly powerful strategy because there is this sensitivity around what people perceive as being over the top in terms of what is too much follow-up and what is not enough. And I've been using this and refining it for 17 years, and what I've found is that it works perfectly. You will never piss somebody off, you will remain professional, and you are going to be consistent and persistent enough to be able to convert a lot more of those people that have you've spoken to and you've given them some sort of a presentation but they haven't bought yet. So you can grab that over at johnblakeaudio.com, and I look forward to hearing your success story once you put that into practice. Okay, cool. So today we're going to talk about qualitative versus quantitative measures. Now, an example of a quantitative measure, so if I was to give you an example from my own world, I could be talking to somebody. One of the questions that I invariably ask is, what is your conversion rate? So out of every 10 people that you speak to, how many convert into a paying client? Now, if someone tells me that there's only 1 or 2 out of 10 each of the people that they speak to that converts into a paying client, that shift is pretty easy to track. So if we can get that up to 4, that is a pretty clear metric in terms of what we're shooting for. So if someone's converting 2 people out of every 10 people that they speak to, and I get them up to 4, well, that effectively doubles their sales. So that's a very easy metric that we can use. So there are quantitative, all sorts of quantitative measures. So one of them could be, return on your advertising, your ad spend. One of them could be your expenses. So if someone was helping you to reduce your expenses, they could ask you what your overhead was, and then they could put together some sort of an expense reduction program, because every dollar that you save goes straight back onto the bottom line. So that's a very clear and easy metric to use to create a shift in someone's business. But there are situations where a qualitative measure can be as, if not more powerful. So by a qualitative measure, we're talking about something that can't be measured in the same way as a quantitative measure. So a qualitative measure could be, I'm not spending any time at home. A qualitative measure could be, I'm not sleeping. A qualitative measure could be, I'm really stressed. A qualitative measure could be, I'm not feeling well, right? So there are some ways that we can use to translate a qualitative measure into something that actually has a metric that you can measure with. But sometimes you don't need to. So I'm going to give you an example, right? So when I first started in this business 17 years ago, I had a client who was a retailer. When I was working with them, I think they had about 200 stores. And we put their sales process together, and they've now got about 1,800 stores globally. At that point, they had about 200 stores just in Australia, and now they've got about 1,800 stores globally. They still use the process that we put together for them. But it was really interesting because in the conversation that I had with this particular guy who still owns the business, I said to him, so tell me, what is your average transaction size? So for a retailer, average transaction size and average units per sale is a very, very important metric, right? So, one of the first questions I asked him was, what's your average transaction size and what's your average items per sale? Because I know that the system that I've got can help somebody to increase their average transaction size. And if someone increases their average transaction size from, say, $100 to, $120 or $150, that's a significant shift in numbers, especially if they've got multiple stores. And obviously items per sale is important too, because the first item that you sell pretty much covers the overhead. It's not until you sell the second and the third item in a retail store that the business actually starts to make some profit. So, very predictably, I guess you could say, one of the first questions I asked this guy was, what is your average items transaction and what is your average dollar sale? And he looked at me and he said, look, we've got, we know that our average transaction size and our items per sale, we've got that covered. And I said, well, what? Because it was such a different conversation because at that point I dealt with lots of different retailers and they were all really concerned about those two metrics. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, look, he goes, you're not going to get me like that. He literally was upfront enough to say to me, look, mate, you're not going to get me like that. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, we're not concerned about that. And I said, well, tell me more about what you mean about that. And he said, look, we've got really good offers in store. We know that our items per sale and our dollar per transaction is going to take care of itself because we have gone to the trouble of putting together deals in store that make it attractive for people to just want to buy that stuff. And I said, well, what's important to you then? And he said, the thing that we are most concerned about, the thing that we are most focused on is we want to be an employer of choice. And I said, well, tell me what that means. What do you mean by wanting to be an employer of choice? And he said, well, look, we're a retail store. We do 60 to 70% of our trade between the start of October and the end of January. And we need to make sure that we've got really good people that work for us. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, I said, how does that tie into being an employee of choice? And he said, well, if we're an employee of choice, if we put together a really good training program and the kids, that we hire, who are mostly part-time, if they really love that, well, then they're going to go to school and they're going to talk about how good it is to work for us. And then it's going to make our job of recruiting all of these part-time staff that we need to recruit between, the start of October and start of November, where things really rev up, because that's just going to make our job so much easier to attract those people. He said, so what we want to do is put together a really, really fun training program to make that particular part of our job easier. And so for me, I was just absolutely blown away, because I was just like, whoa, hang on, you're not looking to, you mean you're not focused on average items transaction and average dollar sale? And he was focused on that, but in his mind, he had that covered. So what was most important to him in terms of a training program was this becoming an employer of choice. And it really blew me away. And I guess the upshot is, even though, you've got things that you are looking at that form patterns in terms of what your clients are looking for, one of the best things that you can do is to really start the conversation rather than trying to force somebody into an arbitrary position in terms of what's important to them. Really be open to what they might actually say at the start of the process. And obviously the strike process that I work with clients and customize to their business allows us to be able to do that. And it actually creates a very, very organic conversation, that can lead nicely, wherever the person's from. So I hope you get a lot out of using that, and I look forward to talking to you on the next podcast. Cheers.
You've been listening to Master Dealmaker's Secrets with John Blake. Subscribe to get more in-depth strategies, to maximize your sales process with new episodes every week. And double your inquiry to sale conversion with the lead flow you already have. Go to johnblakeaudio.com for his exclusive free no fluff audio training and companion PDF guide.